Welcome back to the deep dive. We really appreciate you sliding this into your ears today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Usually when we sit down at this table, we're looking at a stack of articles about things that feel very, right now. We talk about AI, we talk about productivity
The
hacks.
future of work, all that stuff.
Exactly, the future of work. But today we are doing something totally different. We are taking a huge stack of sources. We've
Yeah.
got research papers, excerpts from biological texts, and some really fascinating ethological studies.
It's a heavy stack.
It is a heavy stack, and it's going to fundamentally challenge one of the the heaviest assumptions we make about the world around us. We are looking at the concept of what is natural.
Natural, it is a heavy word, isn't it? I mean,
Yep.
it sounds so objective.
Right.
We use it like a gavel. We use it to justify things, to condemn things, to explain exactly how the world is, supposed to work.
And nowhere is that word weaponized more ferociously than when we talk about sex and gender.
Oh, absolutely nowhere.
That is exactly where I want to start with you today. Because if you grow up with the standard textbook definition of biology, you get a very specific story.
A classic story.
Right, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. The narrative is that biology has this very strict set of rules. Boy meets girl, boy and girl engage in a transaction to mix DNA, baby is born, species continues.
And that's it.
That's it. Anything else, anything that doesn't fit that exact transaction is an aberration. It's a glitch in the matrix.
Right. The prevailing assumption, and this is the one that has dominated science for centuries, really, is that procreation is the sole exclusive driver of animal behavior.
If they're doing something, it has to be to make a baby.
Exactly. If an animal's doing something, it must be to make a baby. And if they aren't making a baby, they are biologically failing.
But the source material we have today, honestly, it kind of shreds that assumption.
It completely dismantles it.
We are looking at a text that explores gay animal parents, massive biological diversity, and the evolutionary puzzles of non-procreative sex. And let me tell you, the animal kingdom described in these papers is a lot wilder and frankly a lot gayer than anything I ever learned in high school biology.
It really is. I mean, the source we're diving into essentially argues that if you think homosexuality is unnatural, you just haven't been paying attention to nature.
You've been looking at a sanitized version.
Exactly. A highly edited, sanitized version of it.
So let's set the stage before we get into the heavy science for you listening. We aren't just talking about one or two weird species here. We aren't just talking about, I don't know, a confused dog at the park or a laboratory rat that got exposed to too many chemicals.
No. And that is a crucial distinction to make right up front. We are talking about a massive scope of biodiversity. The text lists birds, bees, butterflies, beetles.
I saw cockroaches on that list.
Yes, cockroaches, crickets, dolphins, deer, gorillas, geese.
And my personal favorite, the fruity fruit bats, which sounds like a playground insult, but it's a real biological thing in the text.
It is a real thing. And the bears.
Bears, I love that. And butch lesbian penguins.
The ones that beat up the males.
Yeah, exactly those. It paints this picture of a world that is just teeming with same-sex behavior. And the mission of this deep dive today is to look directly at that evidence. We want to debunk the idea that homosexuality is an aberration by looking right at the wild kingdom itself.
Because when you actually look at the data,
Not the Disney movie version.
right, the raw data, you realize that nature just doesn't really care about our definitions. Nature is pragmatic. Nature is diverse. And as we're going to see today, nature is surprisingly fluid.
Fluid.
But we have to be careful not to just list fun facts here. We need to understand the mechanism. Why does this exist? How does it survive natural selection?
Right. Because that's the skeptic's argument, isn't it? If gay sex doesn't make babies, the gay gene should have died out a million years ago. So let's jump right into the thick of it. Let's start with the birds. Because I think we have this image of birds as these sweet, singing, totally monogamous creatures. But according to this text, the bird kingdom is full of drama.
It certainly is. And a great place to start is with the ostrich.
The ostrich. Okay, so unpack this for me. Because I know ostriches have these crazy mating dances, right? I've seen the nature documentaries where the male tries to woo the female.
They do. In a typical heterosexual courtship, a male ostrich will perform a display for a female. And the source specifically describes it as restraint.
It was strange.
Yeah. He sings a romantic song. He does a little display. It's very traditional. He's trying to show he's a stable provider.
Very polite. Like, look at my feathers. I'm a reliable partner for your eggs.
Precisely. But then you have the male ostriches that court other males. And this is not polite. This is spectacular. The behavior shifts completely.
The text calls it fabulous, doesn't it?
It does, and for very good reason. So imagine this. You have a male ostrich who is interested in another male. He doesn't just sing a little song. He charges.
Charge it.
He runs at his object of affection at 30 miles per hour.
30 miles per hour? That is terrifying. That's a car crash waiting to happen.
It's incredibly intense. He charges at full speed,
Yeah.
and then right before he crashes into the other male, he skids to a stop.
Like a cartoon character dropping an anvil.
Exactly like that. He skids to a halt, he pirouettes, he fluffs out all his feathers to look as absolutely big and impressive as possible.
Wow.
And this is the detail that really stuck with me, he twists his neck into a corkscrew shape.
A corkscrew. His actual neck.
A literal corkscrew. It is a high-energy physical performance art piece. And here's the thing. They don't bother with the song.
No song.
No song. The source says they quote-unquote don't even bother. It's like, why sing when you could do this? The physical display is the main event.
It's like the difference between going to a poetry reading and a monster truck rally.
That is a perfect analogy.
But I have to ask, why the difference? Why is the straight courtship so low-key and the gay courtship so high-octane?
That is a really great question. It likely comes down to signaling. In many species, female choice is driven by indicators of stability or health. But male-on-male competition, or male-male attraction, might be driven by raw power and physical prowess.
Got it.
The corkscrew neck and the skid, those are demonstrations of immense physical control and strength.
So he's showing off his athletic ability.
Exactly. He's saying, look at the power I can generate and control.
But here's what I found really curious in the reading. The text mentions that about 2% of male ostriches do this. But the males they are courting, they aren't always obviously gay, right? It's not like they are wearing a sign.
No, and that's the fascinating part regarding communication. To a human observer standing there with our binoculars, we might look at the target male and think, well, he looks just like any other ostrich.
Right.
But the courting male seems to know. The source actually speculates about a sort of ostrich gaydar.
Ostrich gaydar. I love that.
It sounds funny, but in ethology, the study of animal behavior, we call this cryptic choice or subtle signaling. It's highly possible there are cues, pheromones, posture, microexpressions.
Things we just miss.
Exactly. Things we just cannot perceive, but that tell the courting male, yes, this is a receptive audience. Go ahead and do the corkscrew.
I love the idea that there is this whole layer of communication happening that we are completely oblivious to. We're just watching them run around in the dust, but they're actually navigating this incredibly complex social scene.
Absolutely. We assume we see everything, but we are missing 90% of the conversation because we don't speak ostrich.
Speaking of things we might be misinterpreting, we have to talk about the woodpecker.
Oh, yes, the woodpecker with the very descriptive name.
The black-rumped flameback.
I mean, you literally cannot make that up.
The source even makes a joke about it. The author says, I'd call it by its more general name if it wasn't woodpecker. It is a double entendre waiting to happen. But jokes aside, the biological mystery here is genuinely puzzling.
It is.
Because this species, the black-rumped flameback, has a unique distinction in the literature provided. It has never been observed mating heterosexually.
Never. That is the claim. Every single time scientists have observed this specific woodpecker mating, it has been a homosexual coupling.
Okay, so wait, I need to push back on this for a second. If they only mate with the same sex, how are there still black-rumped flamebacks? How did they not go extinct in one single generation? Basic biology says you need a male and a female gamete to make a baby bird.
That is the ultimate logical puzzle, isn't it? The species is obviously reproducing. They're still here. They aren't extinct. So the text poses a very funny but logically sound theory. There must be deviant heterosexuals somewhere in the population.
Deviant heterosexuals.
Right. The implication is that the straight woodpeckers are the ones hiding. They must be sneaking off into the deep woods to mate in secret, while the gay couplings are happening right out in the open where everyone can see them.
That just flips the whole script. Usually in human history, it's the marginalized group that has to hide. But here, the natural order is seemingly reversed. The gay behavior is the public norm, and the procreative behavior is the shameful secret.
It challenges our assumptions about visibility. Just because we see something happening all the time doesn't mean it's the only thing happening. And it serves as a reminder that what is visually common isn't always what drives the population numbers.
And speaking of parenting and species survival, we cannot leave the birds without talking about flamingos, because they are the ultimate power couples.
They really are. Male pink flamingos are surprisingly dedicated parents. And we see this phenomenon where two males will pair up, they have sex, they build a nest together. which is really hard work, by the way, building those mud mounds. And then they rear foster chicks.
So they adopt. Where do they get the chicks from?
A few ways. Sometimes they find abandoned eggs. Sometimes there are complex social dynamics where they end up with a chick because the original parents couldn't hack it, or they were predated. But the key takeaway is that they are fully capable, highly successful parents.
They don't need a female partner to raise the kid.
No, they can feed it. Flamingos produce crop milk in their digestive tracts, which both males and females can do. So they feed it, they protect it, and they raise it to adulthood just as well as a male-female pair. And as the text notes, they don't seem to mind being pink.
I love that line. It's just they are who they are. They're just doing the work of parenting.
And it brings us to this bigger question, though. We've looked at the what? The dancing ostriches, the gay woodpeckers, the flamingo dads. But the real meat of this discussion and where we need to put our thinking caps on is the why.
Right. Because this is the argument you always hear against homosexuality being natural. You hear it all the time. Evolution is about passing on your genes, survival of the fittest. If you are having sex that fundamentally cannot produce a baby, aren't you failing at evolution? Isn't it just a biological dead end?
That is the genetic paradox. If natural selection is a filter that removes traits that don't help you reproduce, why hasn't the gay gene been filtered out millions of years ago?
Exactly. From a gene's eye view, a gay gene seems like suicide.
But it's not.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to expand our understanding of how evolution actually works. We have to move beyond direct fitness and talk about inclusive fitness.
Okay, inclusive fitness. Break that down for me. How does that work?
Direct fitness is simple. I have a baby, my gene continue. That's what we learn in school. Inclusive fitness is the realization that my genes exist in other people too. My brother carries 50% of my DNA. His kids, my nieces and nephews, they carry 25% of my DNA.
So if I help them, I'm technically helping my own genes survive.
Exactly. This is the foundation of Hamilton's rule in biology. The math is simple. If I can save enough of my relatives, I can achieve the exact same genetic success as having a child of my own.
Okay, let's apply this, because the text uses the black swan as the perfect case study for this math.
The black swan. This is the gay uncle theory in action, but it's a lot more aggressive than it sounds. So in black swans, you often see gay male pairs moving in together.
A nice domestic arrangement.
It is. And they are ambitious. They will steal eggs or they will adopt.
Right.
But here's the competitive advantage. Two males are generally bigger and stronger than a male and a female.
Okay, biological sexual dimorphism makes sense. Males are bigger.
Right, so a pair of two males is a formidable defense unit. This means a gay male pair can control a territory that is twice as large as a straight couple's territory.
Twice as large. Just because they have two males fighting for it.
Yes, and more land means more food, more resources, and way better protection from predators.
So if you are a baby swan, a cygnet, you actually want to be adopted by the gay dads.
Statistically, yes. The source says that adopted babies in gay nests survive significantly more often than babies in straight nests.
That is incredible. So the traditional family unit in the swan world is actually less effective at keeping the kids alive.
In terms of raw survival rates, yes, in this specific context. And this perfectly explains the genetic paradox. This is kin selection.
So let me get this straight, make sure I'm following. If I am a gay swan, I might not have my own biological offspring. But if I help raise my brother's kids, or even if I adopt eggs that are related to the broader group.
By ensuring their survival, you're ensuring the survival of the gene. The text points out that gay swans raise their nieces and nephews, or adopted kin, at 4 times the rate that straight swans can raise their own kids.
4 times the rate. That is a massive evolutionary thumb on the scale.
It really is. It shifts the entire perspective from reproduction to survival. It doesn't matter how many eggs you lay if they all get eaten by predators. The gay couple ensures the survival of the genetic line. So the gene that promotes same-sex bonding gets passed down because it creates superior guardians.
That makes total sense. It's not about just making the baby. It's about getting the baby to adulthood.
Precisely. And we see a very similar strategy, but with a fascinating twist. In gulls, specifically ring-billed and California gulls.
The lesbian strategy.
Yes. This usually happens when males are scarce. Maybe there's been a die-off or it's just a bad breeding year. Up to 5% of female gulls will pair up.
So they realize, look, there aren't enough guys to go around. Let's just do this ourselves.
Essentially, yes. They court each other, they build a nest together, but obviously they encounter a biological problem. They need sperm to fertilize the eggs. So they pull a trick.
The text actually calls it a trick, yeah.
One of the females will go out and solicit a male who is already mated. A married male, if you will.
A home wrecker.
In a sense. She lures him in, maybe flaunts the promise of a new territory or just the mating opportunity. She uses him for his sperm, gets fertilized, and then she kicks him out.
Thanks for the donation. Get off my property.
She literally ejects him from the nest. And the male is usually pretty pissed off about this. But, and here's the key, he can't do anything about it.
Why not? He's a male. Presumably he's strong.
Because 2 female gulls defending a nest are stronger than 1 angry male gull trying to get back in.
Power in numbers again.
Exactly. And think about the alternative here. If that female tried to be a single mom, she would fail. You need 2 parents, 1 to fish and gather food, and 1 to guard the nest from predators. A single mom cannot do both simultaneously. The chicks would just die.
It's the prisoner's dilemma of parenting. You literally cannot leave the nest unguarded.
Correct. So by teaming up with another female, even if they aren't reproducing with each other directly, they're creating a family unit that allows their genes to survive. The lesbian partnership is a survival strategy. It allows them to raise chicks to adulthood in a way a single mother never could. So genes for flexibility genes that allow for lesbian bonding gain a massive selection advantage.
It's amazing. It's really reframing the whole idea of survival of the fittest. We always think of fitness as muscle, but sometimes fittest just means smart enough to team up with your best girlfriend and kick the guy out.
It certainly seems that way in the gull community. It proves that social bonding is just as important as the mechanics of copulation.
So that's the birds. They seem very practical about it. It's about territory. It's about defense, survival. But I think for a lot of people, birds feel a bit distant. They're basically little dinosaurs. But when we get to mammals, that's when it starts to feel a little more relatable. And the text goes into some really interesting detail about our furry friends.
It does. And let's start with the grizzlies.
The bears. Let's talk about the bear.
Female grizzlies, specifically. Now, bears are almost always thought of as solitary animals. You see them alone in the woods, hunting by themselves. But the source describes these intense female bonding behaviors. They form lifelong pair bonds.
Lifelong. That implies a level of emotional commitment, not just a transactional, hey, help me guard this river.
Lifelong. They raise their cubs together, essentially co-parenting. But what's really touching and fascinating biologically is that they will actually alter their biological rhythms just to be together. The text says they will put off hibernation just to spend more time together.
That is adorable, but also isn't that incredibly dangerous? Hibernation is about surviving the harsh winter. If they stay up late, they burn fat they need.
Exactly. They're sacrificing metabolic energy for social connection. The author compares them to dorm girls staying up late to talk.
No, don't go to sleep yet. I have to tell you what the salmon did today.
But think about the biological cost of that. If they are willing to burn precious fat reserves just to stay awake with their partner, that tells us the value of the bond is incredibly high. The emotional support, or whatever we want to call it, in bear psychology, outweighs the caloric cost.
It suggests a real emotional depth. It's not just about cold survival. There is a distinct preference for companionship. And we see that ramped up even further when we look at dolphins.
Dolphins are always the go-to example for intelligence in the animal kingdom.
Always. Every documentary.
The contrast here is fascinating. According to the source, straight bottlenose dolphins, they're a bit flighty. They don't form lifelong bonds.
Typical straight dolphins. Fear of commitment.
Apparently so. But the gay bottlenose dolphins, they do form lifelong bonds.
Really? The gay ones are the stable ones.
Yes. The gay pairs are the stable ones in the pod. And the text notes that while some are exclusively gay, most are bisexual. It describes it as a spectrum.
And their brains are huge.
Bigger than ours, relative to body size in some metrics. The implication is that this social complexity, this ability to form strong, lasting bonds, regardless of gender, is linked to high intelligence.
It's not a primitive behavior at all. It's a highly sophisticated one.
Exactly. Complex societies require complex glue to hold them together. Sex is that glue. And speaking of sophisticated glue, we have to talk about the bonobo.
Our closest genetic relative.
Along with the chimp, yes. But the bonobo is very different from the chimp. Chimps are patriarchal, they're territorial, and they're very violent. Bonobos are, well, the source drops a pretty heavy stat here. Every single bonobo is bisexual.
100%. That seems statistically impossible.
That's what the text says. In bonobo society, everyone is bi. And the society itself is radically different from chimps. It's female-dominated.
Feminist apes.
Feminist apes. They are much less violent than chimps, way more cuddly. And their method of conflict resolution is completely unique.
Oh, I think I know this one from the reading.
If there is a problem, say a dispute over food, or a territory squabble. They don't fight. They have sex.
Make love, not war.
Well,
Literally.
Literally. They have significantly more sex than humans or any other apes because they use it as a primary social tool. It diffuses tension. It bonds the group together.
So instead of having a tense board meeting or a fist fight over a banana, they just get intimate.
And it works. They have a much more peaceful society. It challenges the idea that aggression is the only natural way to solve problems in the wild. It suggests that high sexual fluidity actually allows for lower violence.
It's incredible to think about. We look at animals and project our own rigid human structures onto them, but they are out there living these completely different functional lives.
And sometimes those lives get a little complicated. We've talked about pairs, but the text also mentions some arrangements that look a lot more like a throuple.
The goose ménage trois.
Yes. This is a fascinating dynamic. You have a gay male couple, two male geese who are deeply devoted to each other. They display for each other, they hang out, and they completely ignore the females.
The females are just the third wheels.
Exactly. But the female goose, she is persistent. She wants those good genes. She sees these two strong, healthy males who clearly can hold a territory, and she wants in.
So what does she do? How does she get in?
She waits for the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
When the two males are in the middle of their courtship display or even actively attempting to mate with each other, she literally dives between them.
She throws herself into the mix.
She does. And in the confusion and excitement of the moment, she often succeeds in getting fertilized by one or both of them.
Talk about seizing the opportunity. That is bold.
And the outcome is a three-parent family. If you look on the shore, you'll see a mother, a gaggle of goslings, and two dads all sharing food and protecting the babies together.
Again, better survival odds with 3 parents guarding the flock than 2.
Exactly. It just works. It's highly functional.
Now this next part, this one really made me laugh when I read it, but it also made me think a lot about how we view agriculture. We move from the wild to the farm, to the cows.
Yes, the great agricultural irony.
So tell me about the hot lesbian action in the cow pasture.
Well, this is a very well-known phenomenon in animal husbandry. Cows, meaning female cattle, will mount each other. So it's a primary sign of estrus or being in heat.
Okay, so they mount each other to show they're ready.
Now, the farmers, specifically the Midwestern cow breeders the text mentions, they actively look for this. They look for the cows mounting each other. Why? Because it serves 2 crucial purposes for their business. 1, it tells them exactly who is ready to breed, but 2, the bulls are watching.
The bulls are voyeurs.
Essentially, yes. The sight of this lesbian behavior causes erections in the bulls. It physically prepares them for breeding.
So the bull sees the cows getting it on, gets excited, and then the farmer sends them in to do the job.
Correct. The farmer utilizes this same-sex behavior to maximize their profit and efficiency.
But the irony, which the source points out so sharply, is that these might be very conservative farmers.
Right. The text highlights the intense cultural contradiction here. You might have a farmer who socially or politically intensely opposes homosexuality, perhaps actively voting against gay rights in their community, yet his entire livelihood, his profit margin, depends entirely on identifying and exploiting lesbian behavior in his livestock.
The text says, Midwestern cow breeders treat female-on-female mounting as a respectable way to get bulls ready, yet rarely use the method in their personal lives. That is a massive burn.
It is a severe burn. But it underscores the larger point. Biology is there, whether we approve of it culturally or not. It's functional. It exists.
This leads us perfectly into the next section. Because if all this is happening, if ostriches are dancing for boys and bonobos are all bi and cows are doing this, why don't we hear about it more? Why did I learn in school that animals just reproduce and then die?
This is what the text refers to as the heterosexual conspiracy.
That sounds ominous. Is this a tinfoil hat moment? Are we getting to conspiracy theories?
It's a deliberately provocative term, but it points to a very real, heavily documented bias in the history of science. The expert commentary here relies heavily on the work of Bruce Bagmel, a biologist who wrote a landmark book called Biological Exuberance.
And his argument is that we are just interpreting the data wrong.
His argument is that we are actively sanitizing the data. Scientists have a long habit of observing gay behavior in the wild and then frantically searching for any other possible word to describe it.
Give me an example of that.
The walrus.
The walrus, okay.
Picture a big group of male walruses on the ice. They jump to a pile. They engage in enthusiastic rubbing, moaning, and licking.
Sounds like a party.
It does. It's very intimate. But when biologists wrote this up in their official reports, they called it greeting behavior.
Greeting behavior, like, hello, nice to see you, let me just lick you for 10 minutes.
Exactly. And the text makes a very graphic point here to show how utterly ridiculous that label is.
Yeah.
It says, I don't know why a friendly hello had to involve getting covered in ejaculate.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah, that is definitely not a handshake.
No, it's clearly sexual. But because the prevailing scientific paradigm says animals only mate to reproduce, the scientist sees the ejaculate and thinks, well, it can't be sex because they're both males. It must be appeasement or a dominance ritual.
Dominance ritual, that's the other big one we always hear.
Lex, baboons are a great example of this. Macho savanna baboons, they stroke each other's scrotums. They mount each other. They kiss genitals.
And science calls all of this dominance.
Usually, yes. They say it's solely about establishing pack hierarchy. And sure, hierarchy is important. But the text argues, why can't it be both? Why do we strip the pleasure or the explicit sexual nature out of it just because it's between two males? If a male mounts a female, we immediately call it sex. If a male mounts a male, we call it politics.
That is a glaring double standard. It mentions lions, too, the king of the beasts.
Right, the absolute archetype of rugged masculinity. But male lions engage in same-sex behavior all the time in the wild. But we don't see that on the Disney Channel. No, we definitely do not see gay lions in the cartoons. And speaking of censorship, there is a specific story in the text about orcas that is kind of disturbing. This isn't just mildly misinterpreting data. This is actively hiding it.
The U.S. Marine Mammal Commission report.
Yeah, tell us about that. What happened there?
So the commission purchased a scientific paper on orcas, a comprehensive, taxpayer-funded study of their behavior. But before they released it as an official government report, they went through and deleted the passages about male homosexuality.
They just cut it
right out of the report. The behavior exists, the scientists documented it clearly, but the government institution decided, no, the public doesn't need to see that part.
That is literal censorship of nature.
It is. And that's the conspiracy the text talks about. It's not necessarily a smoke-filled room of supervillains, but it's a systemic, institutional filter. Schools, media, government reports, they filter nature to fit a specific agenda, the heterosexual agenda, if you will.
It's like they are trying to protect us from the truth of the animal kingdom, or protect their own rigid worldview from the reality of the animal kingdom.
That is deep.
It is. Because if you admit that the king of the beasts likes other guys, you have to rethink all your metaphors for manhood. You have to rethink the natural law argument that says gayness is against nature. If nature's out there doing it constantly, then the argument just completely falls apart.
Absolutely. Now, sometimes the numbers are just too hard to ignore. You can't censor your way out of raw, hard data. And that brings us to the sheep.
The sheep, paragons of purity and innocence.
The text mentions a study from the USDA Sheep Experiment Station in Dubois, Idaho, which sounds like a thrilling place to visit on vacation.
I'm sure it's lovely in the spring.
Yeah.
But the data they came out with is startling. They studied domesticated rams, and they looked closely at their sexual preferences over time.
So what's the breakdown? Give me the numbers.
Well, first off, 16% of the rams refused to mate at all during mating season.
Just totally not interested.
Nope, 6% seemed strictly asexual, uninterested in sex entirely with anyone. But then you have the gay rams.
The exclusive ones.
10% of the rams were interested only in other males. They wouldn't touch a female if you put them in the same pen.
That's a huge number. 1 in 10 rams is gay.
It is remarkably consistent. In this specific Idaho study, they cited 8% as the hard floor for exclusive homosexuality across herds. And the text notes that these sheep are having anal intercourse in public, in the pens.
In public, no shame in the sheep game.
None at all. But here's where we need to get a little technical for a second. Because this study didn't just look at behavior in the field. It looked at the brain itself.
What do you mean? They did brain scans.
The researchers looked at the hypothalamus of these rams after they passed. Specifically, a very small region called the ovine sexually dimorphic nucleus, or OSDN.
That is quite a mouthful.
It is. But basically, in straight rams, this part of the brain is large. In female sheep, it is small. In the gay rams.
Let me guess. Small.
Small. About half the size of the straight rams. It physically resembled the female brain structure in that very specific region.
So this isn't a choice. This isn't just some phase or confusion in the herd. It's hardware.
Exactly. It strongly suggests that sexual orientation is hardwired into the neuroanatomy before birth. It's a biological constant across the species.
That changes the conversation entirely. If it's
Yeah.
brain structure, you can't argue it's unnatural.
It does change everything.
Okay.
And there is a funny little social insight the text adds about these herds. Apparently, the biggest social problem in the gay sheep community is a severe scarcity of bottoms.
You're kidding me.
The text specifically says most gay male sheep want to be tops. So the bottoms are exceptionally popular in the Department of Agriculture facility.
That is, I mean, I am actually laughing at that visual, but
Yeah.
it also shows a highly complex preference structure. It's not just any male will do. They have defined roles. They have specific preferences.
It mirrors human complexity in a way that is really hard to dismiss as just a mistake or confusion.
So we've covered the who, the animals themselves. We've covered the why, the evolutionary strategies like kin selection. We've covered the bias that actively hides all this. But there is one last frontier we need to explore today, and it's the one that really challenges the blind designer idea of evolution. It's pleasure.
Pleasure. This is the final nail in the coffin for the only procreation matters argument.
Because animals, they aren't just robots trying to pass on genes. They like to have fun.
They do, and they actually use tools to do it.
This part absolutely blew my mind. I know chimps use sticks to get termites out of mounds, but I did not know about the animal sex toys.
It's a field of study that gets very little attention, for obvious reasons. But the text highlights macaques.
The monkeys.
Specifically, it mentions that macaques aren't actually very good at using tools for getting food. They aren't great at cracking nuts with rocks or getting termites. But one female macaque was observed demonstrating 5 different sex toy designs.
5. She's an engineer of pleasure.
She made them and used them solely for her own satisfaction. The text jokingly asks, termites or orgasm? You really have to understand female motivation here.
Priorities. I respect it.
And the Japanese macaques, the females, actually use their own tails.
Their kills.
Yes, they use their tails as vibrators. And the text notes a very practical downside to this. They have to clean their tails a lot more often than the other monkeys.
Well, hygiene is important.
It is, but think about the cognitive leap happening there. To understand your own body and purposefully use an appendage for purely sexual stimulation, that requires a high level of self-awareness.
It's not just primates, though. The text lists porcupines.
Ouch.
Yeah, right. Pork and pine cones.
They straddle sticks, and then the males will masturbate on the exact same sticks. Well, the text jokes that being covered in spikes really does make you kinkier.
And deer using their antlers.
Antlers are highly sensitive erogenous zones for them. They rub them against trees until climax.
And dolphins again. Always the dolphins.
Dolphins are incredibly creative. They rub against the seabed, they rub on turtles, sharks.
That seems unnecessarily risky.
High risk, high reward. And they use each other's blowholes.
Blowhole sex. We're saying it on the show.
We are absolutely saying it. And female dolphins use their vaginas as suction cups to pick up objects from the seafloor.
Okay, that is just raw talent.
It suggests that if our female ancestors had learned that trick, we might never have needed to have all hands.
We'd just be walking around picking things up with our... Never mind.
Let's not go there.
But what does this all fundamentally mean? We have this massive list of toys and masturbation and a pleasure-seeking behavior.
It brings us to the philosophical core of today's deep dive. The expert commentary in the text clarifies the concept of evolutionary intent, or rather, exaptation.
Exaptation, which means what exactly?
It means using a biological trait for something other than what it originally evolved for. Evolution is a blind designer. It doesn't have a master plan. It doesn't look at a hand and say, this is only for holding a spear forever.
Right, it just makes things that work.
The great analogy used in the text is typing. Your hands were evolved for grasping branches, for climbing, for bonding with your tribe. They were absolutely not evolved to type on a plastic keyboard.
But here we are, typing away all day.
And that's a good thing. Just because a body part evolved for one specific reason, like procreation, doesn't mean we are restricted to only using it for that single reason.
The masturbation argument.
Exactly. If natural selection designed genitals, we are not bound to use them only for natural selection's original accident.
It makes a great comparison to humans here, because if we say natural sex is only procreative sex, then most human sex is incredibly unnatural.
Correct. The vast, vast majority of human sexual activity is non-procreative. Sex after menopause, sex during menstruation, sex during pregnancy, oral sex.
The text says the sex you just had with your favorite lover.
Exactly. Evolution knows you can't get pregnant from oral sex. But the mechanism for intense pleasure is still there. Why? Because it bonds us.
That's the key right there, the bonding.
Your genitals were built because they bonded your ancestors to other people. And secondarily, because that bonding sometimes led to babies. But the bonding itself is a crucial survival mechanism for a social species.
So pleasure isn't a waste of time. Pleasure is the literal glue that holds the social group together.
Precisely. Whether it's bonobos resolving a conflict over food, bears staying up late to cuddle in the den, or dolphins forming life partnerships. The pleasure serves a function. It makes the group stronger and more resilient.
So when we look at a gay couple, whether human or animal, we shouldn't see a biological dead end. We should see a bond that strengthens the broader community.
A bond that can raise orphans, a bond that can defend territory better than a single parent, a bond that adds to the overall resilience of the species.
That is a really beautiful way to look at it.
It really is.
So let's wrap this up. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. From the ostrich corkscrew dance
Which is unforgettable.
to the lesbian gulls defending their nests from angry males, to the gay uncle swans, to the 10% of sheep in Idaho.
The evidence across the board is overwhelming. The animal kingdom is queer, it is fluid, it is driven by pleasure just as much as it is driven by procreation.
And the idea that natural strictly means straight is just factually incorrect.
It is a simplified, sanitized narrative that ignores the messy, colorful, fabulous reality of biology.
So here's my final thought for you, the listener, as you go about your day. We spend so much time trying to sanitize nature. We want it to fit into these neat little textbook boxes. This is for that. Male does this, female does that. But why?
Why are we so deeply threatened by the diversity of nature?
Exactly. And if evolution is this blind designer, if it gave us these mechanisms for pleasure just because they work to bond our ancestors together, what does that say about our human obsession with finding a rigid purpose for absolutely everything?
That is the provocative question we have to ask ourselves. We constantly look for the purpose of homosexuality. We look for the biological purpose of the female orgasm. We act like everything must have a strict utilitarian goal.
But maybe the point is that there is no singular point.
Or rather, the blind designer gave us the tools, but left the instruction manual totally blank.
Maybe the point is that we get to choose the point. Maybe the pleasure, the love, the bonding, maybe that is the purpose, simply because we decide it is.
And that, ultimately, is a very natural thing to do.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.